Welcome back to Azimuth Podcast. I'm Kimberly, and joining me is my husband Barrett. Today, we're delving into a topic that has been resurging recently, the resurgence of masks and potential COVID lockdowns. Montgomery County schools outside of Washington, D.C., as well as Morris Brown College in Atlanta, Georgia, have reinstated mask mandates. However, studies question the effectiveness of masks in simply getting sick. One study found that masks may not be as effective as we once thought. In fact, the Cochrane Library, which assesses scientific evidence, found that wearing masks, including N95 masks, had little impact on COVID infection and deaths.
And Kimberly, that's a significant revelation. Maybe that's why on Wednesday President Biden joked, "Don't tell him I don't have it on," when he pulled his mask off during the Medal of Honor ceremony. And Senator Ted Cruz tweeted, if only children in Montgomery County public schools also had the freedom not to wear a mask. But what can it hurt to wear a mask?
Well, Barrett, researchers at a South Korean hospital examined various medical-grade masks, and they discovered that N95 masks released 8 times the recommended amount of a toxic volatile compounds. Prolonged exposure to these compounds had been linked to organ damage and cancer, another dangerous C word.
Yeah, it's not just a matter of effectiveness, but also the potential health risks. Now, in looking at some of these mask mandates when they're coming on, I think the recommendation was to continue wearing N95 masks. So, with the proven chemicals that are coming out of, and I'm assuming it's due to the manufacturing process, and I'm assuming that it has something to do with probably the way the fibers are coated in order to make them effective. But it just seems as though that there's the potential for the mask to actually cause more harm than what it's protecting against. But let's talk about the impact of lockdowns.
Right, Barrett. Let's highlight some significant findings from recent studies. A study compares the death rates across the United States, the UK, and Sweden, which did not have mandates or lockdowns. In a study from Johns Hopkins, as of March 10th, 2023, the United States had a 1.1% of death rates of those who contracted COVID compared to 0.9% in the UK, which had lockdowns, and 0.9%, so the same, in Sweden, which did not have any mandates or lockdowns. So comparing the UK, which did have lockdowns, to Sweden, there is no difference. So the death rates aren't really affected by masks and lockdowns.
And, it's quick to point out that Governor Ron DeSantis was one of the pioneers of lifting lockdowns and not requiring masking. Texas Governor Abbott did the same thing for masks, not mandating at the state level. Now, there were definitely county and city officials that did that, but still at the statewide level. But let's not, forget the impact of COVID on our children. During the previous COVID lockdowns, they lost more than a third of a school year's worth of learning progress, as evidenced by primary school reading assessments and mathematics as well.
I heard about an article written by David Sweg, a writer for The Atlantic. He reports there is a Montessori school in Ithaca, New York, that enacted mask mandates in 2020 and yet never stopped. So to this day, they are still requiring their students and teachers to wear a mask. And the shocking thing that I found in his article about this school, and I've never heard of this, is something called silent lunches.
Silent lunches? I'll be honest, our kids would never make it.
No, of course not. No one is allowed to talk. One reason why parents want kids in school is not just to get them out of the parents' hair, but to learn how to socialize. There are kids in say, second grade. They were in kindergarten in 2020. They've never had a single day of normal school, no normal socialization with other kids. And I have to read this very heartbreaking part of this article. So a fourth grader described the bizarre scene. So kids had grown so forlorn and desperate during silent lunch that they made up their own sign language so that they could communicate with each other. We really just wanted to talk, she said. They contrived unique hand signals to mean different words.
You know, honestly, this is robbing children of being children. And, you know, studies have shown that there has not been widespread deaths of second graders and first graders throughout this pandemic. But I'll be honest, it's the parents' fault. A Montessori school is a private school.
Yes.
Right?
They pay about $18,000 a year to go there.
So a significant sum of money, and yet they are enabling the school to do this. Now, I think you had mentioned in our other conversations that some parents have pulled their kids out of the school.
Yes.
But if you can imagine this little child that's talking about making up their own language in order to be able to communicate, first of all, good on them for being creative enough to do that. But second of all, how heartbreaking is that their parents are choosing to send their child there and pay a large sum of money in order to perpetuate this. The parents need to, and I understand, you know, in some private schools, parents are afraid to speak out because they feel as though their child will be removed from the school.
But if everyone spoke up, then maybe they would change the policy.
Exactly, and that's the biggest thing is the parents need to all band together and stop this madness. I mean, truly stop this madness.
And to mention again, Sweden, which did not impose strict lockdowns, saw no significant learning loss, of course, during the pandemic. This raises an important question. Is it worth the negligible, if any, health benefit to sacrifice our children's education?
Well, that's an excellent question, Kimberly. We also need to consider that the Education Department National Assessment of Educational Progress reported that the largest score declines in math and reading since they began tracking those metrics in 1990. Minority and low-income students were hit particularly hard. And as we've highlighted before, these learning losses could have long-term economic consequences. You have to remember there are second and third order effects to everything. The McKinsey and Company report suggested that a potential lifetime earning reductions for K through 12 students and a substantial GDP loss. So again, second and third order effects that are greater than just the individual child, just the individual family, just the individual school, city, county, state, country. It all magnifies on itself.
And socially speaking, the lockdowns were not only a divisive subject, but also an isolating one. Children were isolated from other children, stunting the development of their social skills. People were in their homes by themselves for months. In Genesis 2:18, it states, "It is bad for man to be alone." And that's in reference to the creation of woman, but I think that's also a community aspect. And having friends and relationships. So what did people do? In turn, they go online where they can get into an echo chamber and further lean into what they already believe or want to hear, instead of talking to people in real life where learning really thrives. And when people feel isolated and are not allowed to be around others, they don't look out for their neighbor. When people are around others, it's possible to make people realize that they aren't that different. And when people come together, they are more likely to feel invested in what happens in their community or school. The lockdowns caused many people to rely on the government for help because businesses were closed. And when people are reliant on the government and become content with it or expectant of it, we have to ask, how could this possibly encourage innovation? When the government's going to fix your problems, I mean, why do I need to invent anything? And how often does innovation drive the economy? Like Amazon or the iPhone. And when businesses are closed, guess what? Goods are not made and thus they're delayed and become more expensive. And when things become more expensive, people want to buy less, and thus businesses, especially small businesses, suffer the most. During the lockdowns, businesses were eligible for PPP loans and EIDL loans. Well, however, another lockdown could ruin any hope of those businesses being able to make those EIDL payments. And people will often say, oh, business owners care more about money than lives. My argument to that are, first of all, not all business owners are wealthy. Many small business owners barely get by. And some business owners took out the EIDL loans not for a rainy day fund or to invest in their company's assets, to get, new shiny signs or anything like that. They took out the loans to keep the employees paid. So another round of mandates and lockdowns will destroy their ability to pay those loans back.
Yeah, I know there's a lot of discussion on whether or not the EIDL loans were necessary. That I saw in a lot of articles and comments that the businesses should have been allowed to fail if they weren't strong enough. If they weren't strong enough to make it, then they should have failed. However,
we've bailed out airlines, banks.
Right. But the biggest thing about capitalism in a free market economy is all things fair and the same applied to every single business. That sentiment could be correct. However, that implies that there is a free market economy, that if people who were in their houses wanted to mask up and brave the wilds in order to go into a business and spend their money, and the competition was equal between those businesses, then if one business fails and one succeeds, then that's capitalism. However, there was an artificial thumb on the scale, and that was the United States government. The United States government forced business closures, and forced stay-at-home orders and things like that. And so that was a outside influence that was mandating things outside of market conditions. And that is why my argument that the EIDL loan is appropriate for these small business owners, because the market didn't dictate whether they were successful. The government shut them down.
Mm-hmm. So hopefully we've just made some good points that COVID is not as threatening in people's lives as much as the response did, and will have. I mean, there were suicides, people lost their paychecks, they lost their homes, and you know what else is bad for people's health? Not being able to buy food, not being able to house their kids. And last I checked, living on the street and having no food and having no medical insurance is not good for your health either.
Yeah, so in the midst of the discussions about returning to mask mandates and lockdowns, it's crucial to remember that the narrative surrounding COVID should not just include safety and saving lives, especially when several studies show that masks and mandates do not affect either.
And perhaps instead of cancel culture, as in, I won't let you attend my wedding if you're not vaccinated, what we truly need is a counsel culture, I heard Dr. Phil say the other day, where we engage in open, constructive dialogues to find solutions that balance these complex challenges.
And with that, this concludes this segment. Please stick around after these messages.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for listening. If you enjoy our show with all the stories we share, we would love your support.
And it's as easy as clicking that subscribe or follow button. This will ensure you never miss an episode and keeps us bringing you these important stories. Your support makes a huge difference. Thank you so much for being part of our podcast family.
Thanks, and keep tuning in.
Welcome back. In this segment, we'll be reacting to Oliver Anthony's latest song, 90-Some Chevy. As with me is Kimberly McNabb, and I'm Barrett McNabb.
It's as soulful as all of his other hits, so let's get to it.
All right.
mine is like a 90-some Chevy. She rides just right when you turn her on. The only thing sounds better than that old 350 is when she's running up to kiss me. When I get home, it's been a hard day. I'll tell you, darling, it's been a long week. Might have to load up the dogs, go and listen to the frogs croaking down in the creek. We can take her nice and slow, a case of beer and a Zemco. Let the sun sink good and low. There ain't no telling where we'll go in the back of that 90-some Chevy. In the back of that 90-some Chevy.
You know, it's interesting. This is kind of a slower song than the ones that we've been reacting to, and you can see that some of the references that he has. I mean, you know, the case of beer and a Zebco. So if you don't know,
what's a Zebco?
Yeah, if you don't know, it's a fishing rod, fishing reel. So he's talking about, you know, getting out there with a case of beer and going fishing, and so I mean, it's you know, he's going back and forth, comparing his significant other to a you know, his truck, and saying, you know, the engine purrs just right. And when he gets her going, she purrs just right as well. And so, you know, it's just with a lot of illusion there. You know, of course, he's talking about his dogs again. You know, he's got to have his dogs in the back of the pickup truck. And so it's a lot of imagination that's going on, and kind of taking you back to where, you know, a creek would be, or, you know, with the frogs croaking and things like that. It's a lot of imagery, and I like it. I like it a lot.
Well, she's hotter than hell, I'm higher than gas. She's sweeter than honey, I'm poor white trash. She ain't had a check that I couldn't cash. I guess that she's my Carter, then I'm her cash. And I've been sitting around drinking on it. I guess I'm gonna have to get me a ring and get it on it. 'Cause that old darling of mine is like a 90-some Chevy.
So this is interesting. First, I'd like to call out the camera work. He has a lot more camera work in this, a lot more production value. Previously, it was in his viral hit, Richmond, north of Richmond. It had just really kind of two angles. It had, you know, the angle both on him, but one was a front shot, one was kind of a side shot that had the dogs, and it just kind of did that a couple of times. This one has a lot of production value, where he has, I guess, called B-roll, where he's in his truck. You know, he's got the dogs in the creek and things like that. Interestingly, there were two firearms that got a close-up. It was a handgun and a shotgun in the passenger well of his vehicle, and so that was interesting to see that. But when you're looking at his past music, I can't help think that he's recalling some of the things in his past. So with her being, you know, extremely attractive, hotter than hell, and
that part might mean she's mad.
She's mad. That's true. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm higher than gas, so she might be mad that he's high.
Right. Yep.
And then sweeter than honey, I'm poor white trash. So he may feel like he doesn't deserve her.
Yeah.
She ain't had a check that I couldn't cash. So there's a saying, is it from Tombstone? Like, don't write a check your ass can't cash. So don't do anything that you can't, you know,
follow through
with. And so
can't write a check that your mouth can't cash.
So to say that about her, like if she's threatening something to make him get clean or something,
Right.
he knows that she'll be serious about it.
Right. And the the reference, the she's my Carter and I'm her Cash. So that's clear that he's talking about Johnny Cash and June Carter. So he didn't say June, but that was her maiden name. And so June Carter and her Cash. Now June was a huge advocate to Johnny Cash getting rehabilitated through addiction service programs and things like that. So this is I'm just thinking that he's alluding that he basically not only is music, because Johnny Cash is a musician, but that his significant other has also helped him get clean as well, as well as God.
And then he says, I guess I'm gonna have to get me a ring and get it on it. So I think he recognizes that this is what he needs and that she's good for him.
Yeah, and that's awesome. That's so awesome that that's what a marriage or a relationship is truly good for. Nobody is strong all on their own. Having different pieces of the puzzle that make your life better and complementary, is good. So I mean,
it's not just about what you want; it's acknowledging what you need.
Exactly, and obviously, his wife or soon to be or girlfriend, his dogs, his songs, his faith is what props him up, and so just super excited to see all this coming together for him.
She rides just right when you turn her on. The only thing sounds better than that old 350's when she's running up to kiss me. When I get home, it's been a hard day. I tell you, darling, it's been a long week. Might have to load up the dogs, go and listen to the frogs croaking down in the creek. We can take her nice and slow, a case of beer and a 7 cold. Let the sun sink good and low. There ain't no telling where we'll go in the back of that 90-some Chevy. In the back of that 90-some Chevy. That old darling of mine's like a 90-some Chevy. She rides just right when you turn her on.
Nice. I like the camera work that he's got going on. He's it just shows that he's realizing that he wants to put some production value into it. But it's a nice smooth song, and I really like it, and I like all the imagery in there as well. Johnny Cash.
It's deep.
Yeah.
It's a deeper than it sounds song, because first you might hear it and go, oh, this is kind of a country song comparing a woman to a truck and talking about drinking and fishing, but he acknowledges that he needs this woman, and the last part, she runs up to kiss him when he gets home. It's been a hard day. She's a source of comfort for him.
Right. And it's just if you have not listened to any of his other songs, if this is the first video that you're seeing of us reacting, I'll make sure I put a link in them. But he, unless you've been buried under a rock, he is much more. He has a lot going on. He's very deep. And the lyrics, when you hear the lyrics, first of all, they're catchy. These are nice songs that he does. He's an amazing artist, but also taking, peeling that onion back and getting to layer after layer, you're gonna really get into some deep meaning with his songs, and I wish him all the best as he continues to make songs for everybody.
And I hope other artists step up their game with
Right.
making their songs meaningful.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. So anyway, that concludes this segment of the Azimuth Podcast. Please stay tuned after these messages.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for listening. If you enjoy our show with all the stories we share, we would love your support.
And it's as easy as clicking that subscribe or follow button. This will ensure you never miss an episode and keeps us bringing you these important stories. Your support makes a huge difference. Thank you so much for being part of our podcast family.
Thanks, and keep tuning in. Welcome back to Azimuth Podcast. I am your host, Kimberly McNabb, and with me is my husband, Barrett McNabb. In this segment, we are continuing our series covering the presidential candidates. Today, we are shining a spotlight on an intriguing candidate in the 2024 Democratic presidential nomination race, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., or RFK as many call him. He's a name synonymous with both environmental advocacy and vaccine skepticism. Before we jump into Mr. Kennedy's background, stances, strengths, and weaknesses, let's watch his campaign announcement video.
What we need in the United States is not division. What we need in the United States is not hatred. What we need in the United States is not violence and lawlessness, but is love and wisdom and compassion toward one another.
Every nation has a darker side, and the easiest thing for a politician to do is to appeal to our hatred and our anger and our bigotry and greed and xenophobia and all of the alchemies of demagoguery. My father and my uncle had a vision for America, a vision of racial harmony, of prosperity for all Americans, of peace in the world, and of honest government. Their lives were tragically cut short, and America took a different path. Yet the possibility they foresaw is still alive, the America that almost was, and yet may be. I've been fighting corporate corruption my entire life, but I understand that today the problem is much larger than a few crooked individuals. The problem is a system that no longer serves the people, and a people who are so divided and so fearful that they are easily ruled. It's time to unlearn the reflexes of fear and blame and find ways to unify ourselves and turn our country around. I won't pretend to you that it will be easy, but I know what it will take. My father said it: love, wisdom, and compassion toward one another, and that's where we need to start. We will scale down the war machine and bring our resources home. We will rebuild our water systems, repair our roads, modernize our railroads, and clean up our environment. We will also clean up government and earn back the people's trust. We will end the secrecy, the censorship, and the surveillance. We will again be a fearless land of liberty.
The cost of freedom is always high, but Americans have always paid it.
We will face honestly the darker parts of our history, the genocide, the racism, not to shame or blame or punish, but to repair as best we can in a spirit of compassion and kindness toward all. I'm inviting all of you to join me to create an America that we can believe in and be proud of again. I'm Robert F. Kennedy Jr., and I'm running for President of the United States.
Okay, that was very inspirational.
Yeah.
Relied a lot on his
legacy.
on his legacy. A lot of imagery, there with John F. Kennedy and his father as well. But he had some new things to say as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I was impressed with that. There's not anything that in that video that I don't think anybody could disagree with. Infrastructure improvements, healing racial tensions, making the economy work for everybody, ending of censorship. Those talking points can be found on both sides of the aisle.
Yeah.
So anyway, I think it was very inspirational and it's very melancholy. The music was not like this giant inspiring thing. It was thoughtful.
Right.
I thought so. But Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is 69. He's married to Cheryl Hines, coming from one of the most iconic political families in the United States. His father, Robert F. Kennedy, was a senator and U.S. Attorney General, while his uncle was none other than the 35th President Kennedy himself.
And Kennedy's family legacy has always loomed large. Growing up in the shadow of his illustrious relatives, he experienced both the privilege and the burden of being part of the Kennedy dynasty. Tragedy struck when his father was assassinated in 1968, further propelling him into the world of politics.
And after completing his education at Harvard University and the University of Virginia School of Law, Kennedy became an acclaimed environmental lawyer. His notable achievements include winning a $290 million case against Monsanto over the alleged cancer-causing properties of their weed killer, Roundup. I've used Roundup in the past. Mm-hmm. He's also a well-known author. Among his published books are 2 New York Times bestsellers, Crimes Against Nature and The Real Anthony Fauci.
However, Kennedy is perhaps best known for his controversial stance on vaccines and his vocal criticism of the COVID-19 lockdowns. His anti-vaccine activism led to his Instagram being banned in 2021, and he has faced opposition even within his own family over his social media posts. However, on his campaign website, it states that he is not an anti-vaxxer, but he believes vaccination should be voluntary and based on informed consent.
Kennedy's campaign platform aims to transcend partisan lines, encouraging people to focus on shared values rather than divisive issues. His ambitions include a blend of ideas. In regards to abortion, he wants to restore abortion rights, but he wants universal free child care and economic relief for working families with the intention of reducing abortion rates. His border policy would control the border with technology like motion sensors, cameras, lights, and ample well-trained personnel. Trying to cross the border by stealth would become a losing proposition. President Kennedy would appoint hundreds more judges to deal with the backlog and to ensure that newly arriving immigrants get a hearing before being admitted into the United States. Regarding the Second Amendment, Kennedy has spent much of his time hunting in Virginia, so he understands the need for guns, but he's not opposed to banning assault weapons. What he may be his most controversial idea is that he is not opposed to pardoning Donald Trump if Mr. Kennedy feels that a conviction violated Mr. Trump's rights. Kennedy boasts several strengths that could propel his candidacy forward. Finally, he has extensive name recognition and his legacy status due to his family's iconic political history. And this recognition provides him with significant platform and the ability to mobilize supporters.
Moreover, Kennedy's willingness to appear on various platforms, including conservative podcasts and TV shows such as Megyn Kelly, The Rubin Report, Fox News, and much more, demonstrates his openness to engaging with diverse audiences. As the youngest candidate in the Democratic field at 69, he brings a unique perspective to the race.
However, Kennedy's anti-vaccine activism has made him a very controversial figure within the Democratic Party among medical professionals. Critics have labeled him a conspiracy theorist for his outspoken views on vaccines and claim that chemicals in the water are turning boys transgender, which could alienate a portion of potential voters. People on the internet have been critical of him for filming himself working out shirtless, either to show off or highlight that he's more physically fit than Joe Biden. But I think I speak for all of us when I say it's clear as day, even with the shirt on, he's a physically fit human specimen. So especially when you consider that he's 60.
Some guns on that video.
Yeah, exactly. Especially considering that he's 69 years old.
Mm-hmm. Additionally, the Democratic Party's decision not to hold primary debates poses a challenge for Kennedy to showcase his positions and engage with other candidates directly. This lack of debate exposure may limit his ability to gain momentum in the primary race.
In conclusion, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. brings a unique blend of family legacy, environmental advocacy, and controversial stances to the 2024 Democratic presidential nomination race. His ability to transcend party lines and engage with diverse audiences could be an asset, but his anti-vaccine activism and limited debate exposure remain significant hurdles.
Well, stay tuned as we track the progress of all the presidential candidates right here on the Azimuth Podcast. Thank you for joining us. Hi, everyone. Thank you for listening. If you enjoy our show with all the stories we share, we would love your support.
And it's as easy as clicking that subscribe or follow button. This will ensure you never miss an episode and keeps us bringing you these important stories. Your support makes a huge difference. Thank you so much for being part of our podcast family.
Thanks, and keep tuning in.